Hi, True Avatars, and welcome to your weekly queer video game podcast. This is episode 33, and I am your host, Zoe Wild. I am a transgender and bisexual woman, and my pronouns are she, her. This week is once again split up into two parts. The first part is news. News, and more news. This week was, again, I'm so glad I did the bonus episode earlier in the week because there's enough news here to fill up almost like an episode and a bonus episode, so I'm going to try to breeze through it all. But yeah, there was a bunch of indie game showcases I've missed in the last month or so with lots of upcoming queer games. There's updates on a Stardew Valley sequel, Chrono Trigger remake news that's real this time, I swear, a new GTA 6 trailer, more queer games are coming out very soon, and so much more. In the second half, a previous guest I've had on the show named Graeme will be back on, and we're going to talk about Playdead's Inside, the bleak, weird side-scrolling puzzle platformer. We're going to talk about what we like, what we don't like, and raise the question, is Inside a queer game? So stick around for the second half of the show for that discussion, and also this week, just to let you know, I'm going to be skipping, in the interest of time, Queer Game of the Week, but don't worry, it'll be back next week. However, before we jump into things, I have a few quick favors to ask. If you like this podcast, please consider leaving a comment, rating, or review on your preferred podcast platform. Leaving feedback not only helps with visibility, but it helps me know what you like and don't like about the podcast so I can improve it as I find my footing. Also, please follow True Avatars, a queer video game podcast on social media. There are accounts on Blue Sky, Instagram, Twitter, Threads, Facebook, and YouTube, and TikTok as well. I don't really update TikTok, but it's all at True Avatars, and you can also find the podcast on the official website, trueavatarspodcast.com, all one word. And remember, this is a weekly queer video game podcast, so check in every week. I aim to bring you news, interviews, and up-to-date discussions that are relevant to queer gamers, so you have a safe space to check in on the world of gaming from a 2S LGBTQIA+ lens. Okay, so I'm quickly going to cover what I've been playing lately, mainly because what I've been playing lately kind of has an 80th anniversary on the day this podcast is releasing. So I want to talk about this game, even though I've been playing it for the last month or so. But a game called Train Sim World 5, which is basically your run-of-the-mill train simulator, like Microsoft Flight Simulator, for example. They recently added, in celebration of Thomas the Tank Engine's 80th anniversary, a Thomas the Tank Engine expansion. And you're probably wondering, why am I talking about this? Well, it's the only thing I've played that I haven't talked about, and even though there's nothing really queer about Thomas the Tank Engine, it is something that I've always had an obsession with, especially as a kid. So being able to go back and kind of play this DLC was really cool, because you get to drive Thomas the Tank Engine, and who hasn't wanted to do that at some point in their life if you've ever liked trains? So yeah, this, like I said, this game is your, Train Sim World 5 is a base game. It's a train simulator. It's got trains from all over history, all parts of the world, that kind of stuff. So a couple months ago, they released an expansion pack that added Thomas the Tank Engine, his coaches Annie and Clarabelle, Devious Diesel, and the Troublesome Trucks. What I do like about Train Sim World 5 is that you can pick your gender and you can pick an avatar. Now, it's all super basic, so you can't really design too much. There's not much you can really add to your character for customization. There's 3 body types of the man and there's 3 body types of the woman. There are no non-binary options, unfortunately, but it is cool that I got to pick my name and gender, which I wasn't expecting because usually these games and trains in general are very male dominated. So anyway, it was really cool that occasionally when you get to see your character in the cab of Thomas the Tank Engine, it was quote unquote me. Again, very basic character design. You're really not thinking about it once you get going in this game. But yeah, basically you can free roam as Thomas the Tank Engine, but there's also a very basic story mode featuring Thomas the Tank Engine and Diesel, where they visit a railway in England. So basically, as Thomas, you're going to make deliveries and pull passengers, and as Diesel, you're going to try to make trouble. You're going to try to impede Thomas, just like in the show. And yeah, there's other little things like shunting cars and pulling into stations, just little details you never think would be super exciting, but doing it as Thomas the Tank Engine is super cool. If you like trains or you like Thomas, I highly recommend this expansion pack. And also, they did actually get the narrator from the most recent incarnation of the show to come in and actually narrate the story mode. And before you ask, it's not Sir Ringo Starr. Ringo Starr has not done any Thomas the Tank Engine stuff since the 80s. But yeah, I'm playing it on PlayStation. What I really, really like about it is there's trophies. So I get Thomas the Tank Engine trophies on my profile. And it's also the first real Thomas the Tank Engine video game since the 80s that actually lets you play and control the characters. And it's definitely the first one made for fans of all ages, which is super cool. So anyway, the day this podcast releases is Thomas's official 80th birthday, so I just wanted to sneak in there that happy birthday, Thomas. And if you like trains or you liked Thomas at any point in your life, go check out this DLC. It's super cool. All right, it's time for news. And like I said, there's a lot of it. So I'm going to try to do my best to keep it as brief as possible, but also at least give you like a little bit of commentary, because otherwise I'm not just here to regurgitate headlines. But anyway, part of this is the fact that I've gone through all three of these showcases that streamed in April and early May to kind of pick out all the queer games. And I had to cut a few because some of them were already released or I've already talked about. So I wanted to highlight new ones that I haven't talked about on the show before. Otherwise, like I said, we'd be here all day. So, first off was the AAA Initiative Showcase. It streamed on April 10th. It was a video game showcase for AAA games made by studios for the players. And this comes from their Steam page, actually, so I am quoting this. But no hosts, no ads, no extra fluff, just games. Tune in for a trailer pack showcase followed by 4 days of game sales and exclusive demos. And this is me speaking again, not quoting, but obviously the demos and sales are over, unfortunately. By the time I knew about the showcase, actually, it was already over. Like, I didn't know about this until, like, I want to say a week after all this had ended. But anyway, going back to the quote, we're simply a bunch of studios banding together to share exciting news to our players in a short show packed with back-to-back trailers. End quote. So there was only one queer game in this one. This was the lightest on queer content, but this game called Ikuma, The Frozen Compass from Moon Eye Studios. The Steam description is as follows. Embark on a haunting journey into the cold in this narrative adventure, either alone or with a friend. Ikuma tells the story of Sam, a teenage boy who finds himself stranded in the Arctic with his dog. He must not only face its harsh environment, but also something lurking deeper in the shadows. And the website description gave a little bit more detail. 1864, an uncharted island in the Arctic. Cabin boy Sam and loyal husky Ellie are stranded in the unforgiving cold. Endure the harsh elements, uncover a bleak mystery, and find your way home and to yourself. Play solo as both characters or cooperatively with a friend. Your survival depends on your friendship. End quote. It has a very gorgeous cel-shaded art style. Like, think like Tears of the Kingdom or like The Wind Waker, like something to that effect. The First Tree also comes to mind in its color palette, but it is an adventure exploration game with ice climbing and dog sledding as playable mechanics, which is super cool. It looks super fun. Like you said, you can play with a friend or you can play alone. I like that it's co-op. There's parts in the trailer where the screen does split up and one of you is playing as the human, the other one's playing as the dog, which is super cool. I'm honestly not too sure what makes it a queer game just yet. I also couldn't verify if the people making the game are queer. However, Moon Eye Studios' logo is a crescent-shaped rainbow, so make of that what you will. But Ikuma, The Frozen Compass, is coming to PC, PS5, and Xbox Series in 2026. And if you want to know more, check the links down in the show notes. I've linked all the stuff I've cited in this news story. Next up was the Galaxies Showcase. So, quoting here, Galaxies is the new gaming showcase bringing you exclusive new looks at a curated selection of AAA blockbusters and ambitious indie titles, end quote. So there were two games in this showcase. One of them was Monster Prom 4, which Ekami and I have previously discussed already, and we did that in episode 24. So if you want to hear us talk about that, especially Ekami, who's the one who played it, the demo, go check out that episode if you're interested. That was episode 24. But the other game, and this game looks so cool. It's called Unbeatable from D-Cell Games, and the description on Steam is as follows. Unbeatable is a rhythm adventure where music is illegal and you do crimes. Follow the story of Beat and her band on the run in a narrative experience full of big emotions, powered by arcade flawless rhythm gameplay. Half the game is walking around and taking things at your own pace, the other half is trying to keep up with ours. End quote. So, the music in the trailer is really, really catchy. It's like pop rock music. It's great. Adorable cel-shaded anime art style. I don't know, visually, the vibes I'm getting from this is Scott Pilgrim anime. So if you like the look of that show, you're going to like the look of this game. It's really pretty. It's very cohesive, and honestly, it reflects the game's rebellious vibe. And it's also full of female characters too, which is great. So there's more of a description from Steam here as well, and I'll read it. The pink-haired girl is Beat, and she is you, and you have a lot of things to worry about. The cops are everywhere, and they're mad at you for what feels like no good reason. Though it doesn't help your case that you keep making friends with people that the cops are mad at for slightly better reasons. Talk to people, help them out, or don't, I'm not your mom. Play huge concerts, and punch cops. And then run away from the cops you punched. And also, there are monsters or something. Not sure what's going on there? All of this culminates in massive set pieces where everything is at stake. The music got you here, it'll get you through it. So obviously, yeah, there's like some side-scrolling exploration elements. I'm not sure if it's all side-scrolling. It does look like there's a bit of 3D. However, the other half of the game is rhythm gameplay. And to be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of rhythm games. I'm not good at them, to be honest. When I was a kid, I played Guitar Hero and Rock Band, and I was bad at them. Usually I miss the beat. Even though like I can hold a beat, as a drummer, and I'm not the best drummer, but as a drummer, sometimes I have trouble keeping up with the rhythm in the game because of input lag. I don't know, something about holding a stick versus pressing a button is a little bit different for me. I don't know, maybe it's just the way my brain works, but this game looks awesome. Like, I really want to play this game. It doesn't look overtly queer in its content. Like, there's not like an immediate, like, here's a lesbian character, here's a queer character, here's a trans character. That said, like, the vibe is very much queer. Like, anti-cop, rebellious, colorful, everyone's got colorful hair, that kind of stuff. Like, you look at this and go, yeah, this is a queer game. However, I do know there is at least one trans person on the development team. The music is done by the band Peak Divide, and one half of that band is called Clara Maddox, and she is a trans woman. Seriously, I cannot recommend this game's music enough, though. Like, go check out Peak Divide online. Their music is amazing, and go watch the trailer for this. I'll link it down in the show notes. Seriously, like, even if you don't want to play the game, I suggest you at least like watch the trailer and go listen to the music. Like, if if rhythm games aren't your thing, not queer games. If you're listening to this podcast, I hope queer games are your thing. But Unbeatable is coming to 2025, PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. I also really hope this is coming to Switch too at some point, because it'd be a really great fit there. And then the third showcase was called Ludo Naracon. Ludo Naracon, and I'm quoting here, is a digital convention celebrating narrative video games, hosted on Steam. An initiative of indie label Fellow Traveler, it aims to create a platform to showcase and celebrate interesting and innovative narrative games, replicating as many of the aspects and benefits of the physical convention experience as possible within a digital format. So, end quote. This showcase actually had a lot of queer games. One of them, which I'm not going to go too deep into, was called Building Relationships, a dating sim where you play as a house that's dating other buildings. If you want to hear more, I previously discussed it in episode 26, so please go check out that episode. But the first game was called Usual June, developed by Finji, and the Steam description is as follows. It was supposed to be a quiet summer break, working odd jobs, hanging out with her new friends, and talking to ghosts. Instead, June is investigating Fen Harbor's darkest secrets, fighting spectral creatures, and canceling a space-time cataclysm before existence itself breaks down and everything goes quiet forever. Follow June and her new besties, alive and dead, as they investigate the town's centuries-spanning history, explore a multi-dimensional continuum, chill at the cemetery, defend themselves against massive monsters from beyond the pale, and deflect their parents' questions about what they're doing after they graduate. Usual June is a third-person action-adventure game with frantic, flexible combat, a witty cast, and an original conspiracy story that is equal parts terrifying, funny, and sweet. So, this game features a black woman as the protagonist. I think that's the first most notable thing that you should know about this game. The combat looks fluid, and the sound design really packs a punch as you whack away at eldritch horrors. Unfortunately, I couldn't decipher exactly how it's queer, but it does have the LGBTQ plus tag on Steam. But yeah, everything about this game and the way it looks and the way, like, the story about it, it's just very interesting to me. It's got that quirky horror aspect. The closest thing I can think of too, in terms of tone and just like, not so much visual style, but visual vibe, is Lost Records Bloom and Rage. That's the kind of like feeling I get from this game. So if you liked Lost Records, you might enjoy this, although obviously Lost Records is point and click, and this is like an action adventure where you are fighting things, and it's a little bit scarier. But again, it's pretty like friendly in its scariness. Also, some of the key art does have bisexual lighting, so it's possible that's how the queerness comes into play. So I do wonder if June as a character is bisexual. But if you're interested in this game, check out the links in the show notes. Usual June is coming 2025 to PC and Mac, and I do hope it comes to consoles at some point, although so far as I can tell, nothing is confirmed. The next game is Seasonala Cemetery, from a team made up of Gabby DeRienzo, Kate Tremblay, Jen Costa, Nina Wong, Helena Heron, Mobeen Fikri, Jacqueline DeLeon. So the reason I list all the names is because that's how they're listed as developer on Steam. They're not like their own company, their own group. They're just individual names listed in a series. But the Steam summary is as follows. Seasonala Cemetery is a meditative experience that invites players to explore the serene beauty of a living, breathing cemetery. Using your system's real date and time, the game changes dynamically. Visit in the summer to see the cemetery bustling with life, or explore in the quiet, snowy winter. Observe and interact with NPCs and animals as they visit Seasonala Cemetery, all while listening to the ambient sounds recorded from a real-life cemetery. Seasonala Cemetery is a peaceful yet poignant reflection on life and death. End quote. Okay, so this looks like a cel-shaded, cozy game. You're learning about the city's history by visiting gravestones, and this might be where the queer characters come in. And it does seem like it's going to be free to play. So what I'm really interested about this game is obviously the gameplay and just like how like relaxed it is, but also it's made by Toronto-based developers, or at least a lot of them seem to be from Toronto, which is nice because that's where I'm from. And there do seem to be some non-binary people on the dev team. And this is the same team that made The Mortician's Tale. So I couldn't find a trailer for this game either. On Steam, it's just screenshots. However, there is an 8-minute playthrough on YouTube from an independent outlet, which I'll link in the show notes. So feel free to go check that out. But it's very calming, very peaceful. Obviously, maybe a little triggering if cemeteries aren't your thing. But I do think it's really interesting that they're bringing the real-time elements into it. Games very rarely do that. In fact, the last game that I played, I think had that mechanic was Pokemon Black and White 2. And currently, Seasonala Cemetery has no release date, but it is coming to PC at some point in the future. Next up is Battlesuit Aces from Trinket Studios. The Steam summary is as follows. Battlesuit Aces is a charming narrative deck builder. You'll recruit, befriend, and upgrade your mech pilots on a heartfelt hunt for fabled alien superweapons, the Relic Suits. Command them across monster-infested galactic wilds through danger, tragedy, and comedic sci-fi shenanigans. End quote. So, the vibe I'm getting from this is that this is an 80s Saturday morning cartoon. It even, in the trailer, it even has like an 80s, 90s cartoon announcer voice narrating everything. So if you're into deck builders or you're into cheesy, fun sci-fi stories, and I say cheesy in a like a complimentary way, about space, monsters, and mechs, this game is for you. I'm not really sure how it's queer, but the description does say that there are 50 befriendable characters, so some of them have got to be at least a little fruity. But anyway, so yeah, Battlesuit Aces has the LGBTQ plus tag on Steam, which is how I found it. And it is coming to PC and other platforms to be announced. It has an unknown release date. Yeah, it looks super cool. Deck builders aren't really my thing, but I might make an exception for this because I dig the 80s, 90s Saturday morning cartoon style. It's super nostalgic. And our last game is Wander Stars from Paper Castle Games. So the Steam description is as follows. Unleash custom attacks by combining words in a super anime turn-based RPG. Join Ringo, a young martial artist looking for her brother, and Wolf, a mysterious scoundrel running from his past, as they join forces in an unlikely partnership to collect the pieces of the fabled Wander Star map. Across 10 quote-unquote episodes of anime-inspired adventure, Ringo and Wolf will have to work together to find answers, make up for past mistakes, and travel across the universe in search of their goal. And who knows, maybe they'll learn how to get along at some point. Wander Stars is inspired by the anime the developers grew up watching in 1990s Venezuela, and shows like Dragon Ball Z, Cowboy Bebop, Sailor Moon, One Piece, and more. It's that end quote, first off, but it's also giving me Ranma vibes, which is like really nice. I think the character looks a little bit like Ranma, to be honest, which is awesome in my opinion. But I think what's really cool about this game, besides the vibes and the character design and generally everything else, is that you combine words that you get in a list instead of attacks to form the attacks. Right, so some of the words I saw in the trailer were like knee, counter, block, punch, smash, cure. But from Steam, there's a bit of description on how this works. Action words do something, e.g. kick, block, or item. Modifier words modify actions, e.g. super, +1 damage, fast, reduces cooldown, or huge, attacks all opponents. Elemental words add an elemental impact and status effects, e.g. fire adds burn, or water adds wet. End quote. So I think that's just super cool. Is that it gives you this like malleability and control over how your attacks work. You're like, hey, I want a fire block or I want a water punch. I don't know. Those are basic possible combinations, but I just think like it opens up so many possibilities in your combat style, which is great because you can play the game the way you want to play while enjoying this absolutely bananas story. And the music is super catchy. It does have the LGBTQ plus tag on Steam. I'm guessing some of the supporting cast is likely queer. I couldn't figure out what makes the game specifically queer. But given that the main character looks a bit like Ranma, it's entirely possible that the devs were also inspired by Ranma. And Ranma is a pretty queer story. For anyone who doesn't know, Ranma 1/2 is about a boy who gets cursed to turn into a girl every time he gets wet. At first it's a curse, but as far as I can tell, kind of likes it a little bit, or at least maybe that's my own projection of it. I don't know why he ever would want to change back to being a boy. But anyway, Wander Stars is coming to PC and Nintendo Switch in 2025, and there is a demo on itch right now if you want to check it out. And I have linked that down in the show notes. Okay, that's it for all the showcases. So if you want to check them out in their entirety, I'll name them again. There was III Interactive, there was the Galaxy Showcase, and then there was Ludo Naracon. So next up, I'm going to try to breeze through some quick headlines because there's not too much to say about these. First up, Final Fantasy VII Remake Trilogy will seemingly be coming to Nintendo Switch 2. So Nintendo released another Creator's Voice video, a series in which they feature game devs who are making games for Switch 2, and they talk about their games. This week featured Naoki Hamaguchi, and in the video he said, I felt the Nintendo Switch 2 would have enough power to run the Final Fantasy remake series I was creating. I hope players are looking forward to the Final Fantasy VII remake series on Nintendo Switch 2. Obviously, this isn't 100% confirmation, but it does sound like at least games beyond remake itself will be coming to the Switch 2. So yeah, Rebirth hasn't been announced. There are credible leaks suggesting that maybe Rebirth is coming next year, and we do have a suspicious feeling that Part 3 will be coming in 2027. So if I had to guess, you get Remake this year, you get Rebirth next year, and then in 2027, when Part 3 comes out, it'll come out on Nintendo Switch 2 as well. Again, not confirmed. I also think it's a little weird that he's calling it the Remake series and not the Remake trilogy. Does that mean there might be games beyond Part 3? I don't know, but trilogy just feels more definitive and complete to me. So I do think it's interesting that he picked the word series. Anyway, Grand Theft Auto 6 has a new trailer. So I discussed the new release date in episode 32, which is May 26, 2026. But this week, GTA 6 revealed a brand new trailer, and it was all captured on a base 2020 PS5. So I'm not the biggest fan of the GTA series, but this trailer looked visually incredible. I was going back and forth. Like, I've seen comparisons between GTA 5 and GTA 6, and I was going back and forth between them. And like, GTA 5 already looked pretty good, but GTA 6 looks way better. It's actually incredible how much detail has gone into this game. And the game features two playable protagonists, a man and a woman, and they're a couple in the game story. They're also really attractive, both of them. So I was kind of having bi-panic watching this trailer. So even though I'm not the biggest fan of GTA, like I said, I am considering playing this one because it looks really good. Like, just at face value, if you were to list all the bullet points of what makes this game different and exciting, it appeals to me. Now, granted, I'm not always a fan of how the game makes fun of minorities. I'm not always a fan of how the game makes fun of people in general. I think it is a bit schlocky in its story, and I know that's the point. It's just never been really my jam. I just hope that, like, if I play this game, I don't find out there's some, like, token disturbing transphobia, because I feel like that's par for the course with GTA. But seriously, even if you're not into GTA, go check out the trailer. I'll link it in the show notes. Because even if you're not into this series, you have to check out how these visuals look, because it's a preview of what, like, it feels like next gen. When I say next gen, I mean like current gen, PS5, Xbox Series. It feels like it's actually finally here. And that's not a knock on previously released games, but like, it really does feel like this is a game that could only run on the PS5. Next up, Stardew Valley's creator says he's open to making a sequel, but updates to the original game are much easier. So it's no secret that Stardew Valley is one of the most successful indie games of all time, and it's a no-brainer to make a sequel. But Concerned Ape, the game's creator, says, quote, "I might eventually make a Stardew Valley 2, to be honest. It's just so much easier to just add more stuff to Stardew Valley than to make a whole new game from scratch. The major systems are already done. That's the stuff that's not fun to do. When I make an update, it's like, oh, throw this in, throw in that, let's add Green Rain," end quote. So on one hand, more queer inclusive content would be amazing. So a sequel would be great. But on the other hand, why make a sequel to a game when it's easier to add new content to the existing game? But also, like, it's a farm sim game. What can a sequel possibly do mechanically, story-wise, environment-wise, that's going to be fundamentally different and unique enough to build upon the original game? Obviously, there's ways like that a sequel could work. Like, you could make it 3D, you could improve the visuals, but I think what people love about Stardew Valley is exactly what it is, right? It's simple, right? It's obviously got depth to it, but like, at the surface, when you start the game, it's a farm game. It's got a nice town with nice characters, it's got a variety of biomes. Like, there's not too much more you could possibly want aside from a few minor features. Now, obviously, if they make a sequel, I would like to see non-binary character support, maybe even all pronoun support. That would be super cool. I think this is one of the games that would definitely demand it, and hopefully Concerned Ape would be listening. But right now, Concerned Ape is working on Haunted Chocolatier, so I do think if there's a Stardew Valley sequel, it will be a long time from now, but given its success, I do think it will come eventually. That said, though, even if it doesn't come, I could see Stardew Valley being updated forever. I thought 1.5 for the longest time, that update was going to be the last update for the game, and there was 1.6. And now that Concerned Ape is talking about adding more stuff, just in a general sense, not confirming that there will be, it sounds like it might just keep getting updates for the longest time. So who knows? Deltarune. We have some Deltarune news here. It will be quote-unquote cross-buy on respective consoles. So I wrote all these show notes explaining how this works, but I think it's better to just read the quote directly from Toby Fox. So Toby Fox wrote, "Hey, do you want a good deal? Thanks to cross-buy, when you buy Deltarune on the PlayStation Store, you get both PS4 and PS5 versions for one price. And we're basically going to do the same on Nintendo Switch platforms. If you buy the game on Nintendo Switch and decide you want the Switch 2 version later, you can get it at no additional cost. And vice versa. That's right. For one single price, you'll be able to get both versions of the game." So, we knew PlayStation already had this option in the store for a lot of games, but we haven't had any confirmation, or hints even, that Nintendo Switch was going to do the same thing on the Switch 2, where you could get the upgraded version for free. A different quote-unquote file of the game. Obviously we know that there are going to be some Switch 1 games getting updates, but yeah, this is like a proper confirmation that there's going to be like a Nintendo Switch 1 version and a Nintendo Switch 2 version in the store, and if you buy one, you get the other. That's super cool. There is still hope for a Chrono Trigger remake. In last week's bonus episode 32.5, Amy Lynn and I debunked the rumor that co-creator Yuji Horii had confirmed that a Chrono Trigger remake was in development. But he also did another interview afterwards where he basically clarified that he was trying to get one made. So this comes from a Spanish outlet, Game Reactor, and it's translated by a Reddit user. So I'm not sure if it's straight translated or machine translated, but bear with me here. Quote, Horii confirmed that following the success of the HD 2D remakes of Dragon Quest III 1 and 2, he has received numerous requests from fans and is beginning to contemplate a possible remake of Chrono Trigger to celebrate its 30th anniversary. It's still only an initial consideration with no timetable or official confirmation of development, but it makes it clear that the idea is on the Japanese developers' radar. End quote. So I do think this basically means that we're not going to see anything in time for this year for the anniversary, unless they rush out a port of the PC version for consoles. But this at least means there's a chance we'll get something in the not-so-distant future. And it does sound, based on this paragraph from the article at least, that maybe the idea is to do an HD 2D remake. But True Avatars, I want to pose the question to you. Would you rather an HD 2D style remake in the style of Octopath Traveler, or a full-fledged cinematic 3D remake in the style of Final Fantasy VII Remake? Or do you just want the original version that's basically been ported to Steam, ported to consoles? Let me know in the comments, please. I would love to hear from you. Continuing with quick headlines here, we have a few more. PlayStation has unveiled a new studio, Team LFG. And no, the LFG does not stand for Let's Fucking Go. It stands for Looking for Group. From the blog post where they revealed this, quote, "Our studio is headquartered in Bellevue, Washington, with team members working both on-site and remotely throughout the US and Canada. Yay! We are a team composed not just of industry veterans who have shipped titles like Destiny, Halo, League of Legends, Fortnite, Roblox, and Rec Room, but also industry newcomers with fresh creative perspectives and skills. We are passionate about exceptional action-based gameplay, moment-to-moment game feel, and richly social virtual worlds." So it does seem like they're making a multiplayer game, and all we know is that it's, quote, "a team-based action game that draws inspiration from fighting games, platformers, MOBAs, life sims, and frog-type games. Players will inhabit a lighthearted comedic world set in a brand new mythic science fantasy universe," end quote. Sony really does seem to like their multiplayer games lately, and the industry overall seems to enjoy frog games quite a bit. I can think of a bunch off the top of my head. I just hope the game doesn't get cancelled before we see it, and that when it releases, it does well enough that it doesn't get scrapped like Concord. I'm not the biggest fan of multiplayer games, but I am tired of seeing these games become dead on arrival. Part of me wants the industry to stop making so many multiplayer games so all these games will stop failing. But also, I want to see them succeed so that way, these multiplayer games are going to fund, they're going to be cash cows and they're going to fund better AAA single-player games or even AA games, to be honest. For every multiplayer game, I'd love another Astrobot type game. So, plus this game especially sounds it's going to be a little bit cuter, given that it's quote-unquote a frog type game. Next up, Echo the Dolphin is getting 2 remasters and a new game. Echo the Dolphin's creator, Ed Annunziata, did an interview with Xbox Wire for Asian and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and he revealed that the original Echo the Dolphin game and its sequel Tides of Time are going to be remastered. He also added that once those remasters are complete, the same team will develop a brand new entry in the series. So there were no other details mentioned. In fact, it's like a fairly brief, long interview, not brief, but a fairly beefy interview. And it's just like one paragraph in this article, in this interview, where he mentions that these games are getting remasters. So right now we don't know if the game is going to be 2D like the original games or 3D like Defender of the Future. However, it appears that Ed Annunziata was not involved in the 3D Defender of the Future game, so my guess is that this new game is going to be 2D. There's currently a countdown on the official Echo the Dolphin website, and that's going to run out next year, so I think we're going to hear more about the remasters then. Alright, finally made it to the last quick headline, True Avatars, thank you for bearing with me. Via Gaming Mag, Yokai Fantasy Life Sim Tales of Seikyu launches May 21st on Steam Early Access. Quote, "Discover a fantastical world of yokai. Harness legendary powers of shapeshifting, explore LGBTQ+ romance options, and settle into a magical new life in Tales of Seikyu, an enchanting fantasy life sim launching May 21st on Steam Early Access. Shapeshift into magical yokai forms to build your dream farmstead and explore the world on an adventure to uncover the secrets of your long-lost family. Soar freely in the skies as the majestic crow Tengu, dive deep for sunken treasure as a slippery slime, or till the farmland as a powerful boar. Cultivate crops, raise livestock, craft furniture, and cook meals from locally sourced ingredients, while renovating your ancestral farmhouse, expanding its rooms, and decorating it to your liking. End quote. So, it features player sexual romances, which means you can romance anyone regardless of gender. The game is advertising itself as LGBTQ+. Obviously, we've debated in the past whether player sexual is queer, but I think given the shape-shifting elements, and there's like some very sapphic key art of a woman with wings carrying another woman in her arms as she flies through the sky. So I do think this is a little bit more queer in its player sexuality than maybe other games are with player sexuality. I don't know. I think at the end of the day, as long as there's player sexual romances, the game is queer friendly and not like queer phobic in any way, I think it's an acceptable pass. But yeah, I know it's another farm sim game. At least part of it is, but between the cozy vibes, the shapeshifting, and the LGBTQ+ player sexual romances, this does feel like a very queer game. It's a 3D sim game. It looks very charming. It's well animated and designed. I think all the different ways you can play the game, kind of like Stardew Valley in a way, make it very exciting. You know, combat, farms, exploration. It's taking a lot of elements that gamers have come to love from recent games. You know, like dungeon exploring. You know, that almost RPG element. You know, the Breath of the Wild, you know, open world explore kind of stuff. And then obviously the farm sim stuff. So I think this checks a lot of boxes. So if you want to kind of, you know, 3 birds with 1 stone type thing, this might be for you. The article does contain a trailer though, so please go check it out. I'm going to link it in the show notes. But this is available May 21st in early access, and it's called Tales of Seikyu. All right, we've made it through the quick headlines. Thank you for bearing with me so far. I have 3 more headlines to go, and these are more beefy. So anyway, this comes from Automaton Media. Level 5 CEO says games are now being made 80 to 90% by AI, making aesthetic sense a must for developers. So, in what seems like a case of corporate heads projecting their own views onto other people, the CEO of Level 5, you know, the company that makes Professor Layton and other games, says that generative AI is being quite heavily used to assist in game development, not just at, well, actually, he doesn't even really talk about his company, but he's talking about other game studios. I personally think he's projecting because I know I've seen generative AI art. I think for the new Yokai Watch game, there was an AI-generated piece of art. So maybe they're using 80 to 90% AI in their workflow, so they assume other people are doing it too, or maybe they know for a fact that they are, and people just aren't talking about it. But anyway, I'm going to read the quote. Through this program, I hope many of you will get to soar to the global stage as game developers. While I am also actively working as a game developer, I've recently found myself thinking that AI technology is encroaching upon the creative world. Currently, around 80 to 90% of codes are written by AI, and then fixed up and finalized by human programmers. In other words, it means that right now, 80 to 90% of games are made by AI. And it doesn't just stop at programming. AI technology is encroaching on art, music, and even game design on a large scale. Not to mention that it's already becoming common sense in the creative world to rely on the power of AI to boost work efficiency. That is why I believe that aesthetic sense is a necessary skill for game developers. So, end quote. That last quote where he talks about aesthetic sense is necessary for game developers almost sounds like he's encouraging that we still need humans to kind of guide the process, or maybe even we still need humans to just make the games. But like I said, there is generative AI artwork of the upcoming Yokai Watch sequel. I'm pretty sure it's Yokai Watch. And it's disappointing because for a minute there, it seemed like Level 5 was kind of going by the wayside. They stopped publishing outside of Japan. So this big comeback with all these new games is really exciting, but to hear that the CEO thinks this about AI doesn't fill me with too much hope. So I also want to say too that like he's probably right that there's a lot more AI being used in creative content than you think. I do happen to know that tons of marketing and corporate videos are using generative AI from various stages of the process. And creators are definitely open to using it, even creators who might seem progressive and inclusive, and I'm not going to say too much more about that, but I do think we're heading towards a future where generative AI is used more and more. However, at least Nintendo recently said that they won't be using AI and even debunked claims that they used it for Mario Kart World. So at least one game maker isn't using it as far as we know. So I do hope more devs come out and confirm that they'll be staying away from it. It would be reassuring to know that, but the silence is deafening. So this comes from Kotaku, and I think this headline is misleading. So I actually want to talk about it because I think it's relevant to this podcast because it's talking about a queer game. But the headline is misleading. And if anyone saw this article, or at least the headline, and just kind of like only read the headline, because sometimes I do that too. I only read, before I started the podcast, I would read a headline and I would read comments. But now I read the articles a lot more, especially for the podcast. So anyway, from Kotaku, ex-BioWare lead says the Dragon Age team didn't feel supported during Veilguard development. So, like I said, this is a bit complicated because they're talking about Veilguard, but they're actually talking about Dragon Age 4 before it became Veilguard. So, and also the timeline of events is a little confusing. So, especially reading the article, I was like, I'm not really sure what I'm reading here. So I watched the video linked in the article that the article pulled from. Anyway, so what I learned from this article and this video is that Dragon Age 4 actually began development all the way back in at least 2016, but EA was more interested in Anthem, the infamous Iron Man-like multiplayer game that didn't do super well. So as early as 2017, EA and BioWare weren't supporting the team that was trying to bring Dragon Age to fruition. So Mark Darrah, the executive producer on Dragon Age until recently, was asking for more money and staff to develop Dragon Age 4 back in 2017. It was then that EA and BioWare pulled the team making Dragon Age away to help finish Anthem, making Dragon Age even harder to develop. Mark Darrah tried to stop this by progressing Dragon Age's development to another point, basically what he called a gate, which would then require more hands, allowing him to keep his team off of Anthem. But that ultimately failed, and then eventually EA forced a reboot in development by demanding that Dragon Age 4 become a multiplayer live service game. So until Anthem shipped, Dragon Age 4 didn't have the leadership it needed for development to progress as intended, because the team was downsized. Since becoming a multiplayer game meant going back to the drawing board, they only needed a small team for that drawing board. Mark Darrah left BioWare in 2020, and Dragon Age 4 development was rebooted again. I have to assume it was anyway, because eventually that multiplayer game became a single-player game, and eventually became the Veilguard. So the headline implies that it was specifically Veilguard that wasn't supported during development. Like the last 4 years, from 2020 to 24, EA wasn't supporting the development on Veilguard. That's not true, because Veilguard technically, in the form that it released in, did not exist in 2017. It could have been a different game. So I think saying that Dragon Age the Veilguard wasn't supported sounds like EA wasn't supporting it the entire time it was in development, including 2020 to 2024. So in this sense, I do consider Dragon Age 4 and Dragon Age the Veilguard, even though that is Dragon Age 4, I consider the 2017 version of Dragon Age 4 and the Veilguard to be two separate games. So it's a little disingenuous for this headline to lead with Veilguard wasn't supported, when really it was the game that predated two versions of what Veilguard were at one point, like the multiplayer game and then the Veilguard proper. So anyway, it's all a little long-winded, but yeah, I'm a little upset that Kotaku wrote this headline saying that it was Veilguard. I know it's kind of got to be for clicks, but they could have clarified that it was Dragon Age 4 before it became the Veilguard. I just think it's a little... Obviously, the story is still true that Dragon Age 4 wasn't supported in 2017, 2018, and 2019, but then 2020 came along. Mark Darrah wasn't even there for the development after that. He came back on as a consultant in 2023, but he doesn't talk about that in the video, right? So I think if Dragon Age the Veilguard itself wasn't supported, even as recently as 2023, he would have said that in the video, but he's not. He's talking about 2017. So just some clarity is what I wanted to add there. All right, True Avatars, we've made it to the last headline. And I've been talking a while, so my voice is starting to get tired, just like it was in the Nintendo Switch 2 Experience event video. So Video Games Chronicle, one of my favorite websites to go for news, because it's just kind of like, it's like the meat and potatoes almost of news. Like it doesn't like have too many other things that are just for clicks. It's just kind of like, here are the headlines of the day that are most relevant to gamers. But they've highlighted a queer game, actually, and it's coming out next month. And the game is called Quantum Witch. It's being described as a 2D plotformer, not platformer. So like a platforming game with a point-and-click choose-your-own-adventure story. And it's about a lesbian woman named Nikki J, who's and her experiences in a homophobic cult. Yeah, it's pretty heavy, but from the article it reads, the game tells the story of Ren, a 20-something shepherdess who gets thrown into a multiversal conflict while on a fetch quest to find her lost flock. Through the choices players make in the game, Ren will ultimately decide the fate of her homeland while dethroning a god in the process. Nikki J, the developer, said, I was raised in a religious cult that was obsessed with the end of the world, refused certain medical treatment, deferred all authority to their god, and mostly the 8 men who led the group and told them what God actually meant when he said certain things, and blamed many mental and developmental disabilities on quote-unquote the demons, she explains. I found computers and games were one of the few forms of escapism I was allowed to have. I saw friends die because they refused medical treatment, I saw lives wasted and families torn apart because of the rules of the men in charge set. Any form of personal talent was put down as prideful, all glory should go to God. Women were denigrated and blamed for the world's wrongs, painted as weak, and any form of ambition in a woman was considered as bad as, gasp, homosexuality, because a woman's brain could not deal with being an authority. End quote. So just to reassure listeners, Nikki has escaped the cult. She has a family, kids, and pets, and is now turning her trauma into this video game. With experiences that loaded and traumatic, I do expect this game is going to be very raw and insightful, but not only that, it does look like a lot of fun. Like, it's got some silliness, it's got some zaniness, like, it's not dark and grim, like, maybe the visuals a little bit, but like, and thematically, but again, like, it does seem to have some personality and charm in the sense of, like, it being kind of lighthearted is almost a way of, like, processing how dark the concepts are. Gameplay-wise, however, it reminds me a lot of that one Community episode, you know, the one that takes place almost entirely inside a 2D 16-bit video game? So, I actually looked because I thought that Community episode had been based on specific games, but I couldn't find anything proving that it was actually based on specific video games. Like, there were quote-unquote platformers from the 90s that I missed out on. So yeah, if you've wanted to play a game like that Community episode, but you want kind of a different vibe in terms of like something a little bit darker than just like a rich dude, you know, attacking a bunch of friends, this game is for you. But in that episode, for anyone who doesn't know, it featured a video game that had platforming and combat, as well as point-and-click elements, puzzles, and choose-your-own-adventure elements. And it does seem from the trailer, too, that this Quantum Witch game does not seem super heavy. And please go check out the trailer. It's linked down in the show notes. Quantum Witch is coming to Steam and Linux on June 24th, and it will be Steam Deck compatible as well. Okay, True Avatars, we have made it to the end of the news. Thank you so much for sticking with me. After this musical interlude, I will be back on with Graeme, and we're going to discuss whether or not Playdead's Inside is a queer game. Hi, True Avatars, welcome back from the break. With me is Graeme, pronouns he, him. Graeme is a gay man and one of my oldest friends. Graeme, can you believe it's been 17 years since we first met on the first day of high school?
Honestly, I can't. I was actually regaling a friend about it the other day. How it was like, that was the most random encounter I had, I think, in all 4 years of high school. It was just first day I was like, hi! And here we are, 17 years later. So,
what are the odds we sought each other out? Like, we just found each other like that. Two of the most closeted kids in the entire high school.
I mean, I think it was it was definitely a little bit random, how we met, but then the sticking with each other, I think that was the true test.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's been a great 17 years, although I gotta say it, we went from seeing each other every day in high school and talking all the time to just like life being too busy. We even went to the same university for a year, and then that didn't we stopped going to the same university, so we saw each other less and less over time. And then all the stuff that happened in between, of course, with coming out for both of us, and so it's just been
a fun ride.
Yeah, 17 years is a long time. A lot happened in that span of time.
Oh,
and then our
real.
entire high school friend group ended up being gay, so
yay, more gay.
For listeners who don't know, Twitch streamer Ekami, who I have on regularly, she's also part of our friend group. I know we've talked about this in the past, and someday I'm going to have all three of us on in the same podcast, and you'll hear the gay.
That will be like herding cats, in all honesty.
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was only a few weeks ago that I had you on, like maybe a month or two, and then I looked and I think it was like early February the last time I had you on the show, and I was like, oh yeah, this is episode 33, and that was episode 19 was when I last had you on, and anyway, the podcast has come a long way, we've come a long way, and like life's been busy, so.
Absolutely, so much changes, but it's always nice to be back.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to have you back, and I'm glad to talk to you about Playdead's Inside, the side-scrolling puzzle platformer. I think from either 2015 or 2016. I did not fact-check that before we started. But for listeners listening, Playdead's Inside, we're going to be talking about pretty much all the spoilers. Any spoiler in this game you can possibly imagine, it will probably come up. So if you haven't played the game, you should go and change that because it's awesome and amazing and also not that long, like 3 or 4 hours total. Also, so you're not spoiled if you haven't played it. But then once you've played it, come back to the podcast and listen to this discussion, which I'm sure is going to be very interesting. So,
yeah, if all goes well, you can get through the game in about 2 hours. That is, again, if all goes well. And when I play this game, it never goes well. So I'm always lagging a little bit.
This game is a side-scrolling puzzle platformer, as I mentioned. So you're basically at the beginning of the game, you're playing like a 10-year-old kid, and you're dropped into this like side-scrolling world. It's bleak, it's monotone, it's dark, and there is some light stuff to it, but it's got a very monotone vibe. So colors stand out when they need to stand out. But yeah, the whole game is like you're kind of left figuring things out for yourself. There's no real hints in the game. There's no real explanations. There's barely explanation of the controls. There's no text. You're just dropped into this world, and from visual cues, you got to figure everything out. And then it gets more stressful as you go along. And like, that's where the not going well always comes in, is like, I thought I knew all the answers to all the puzzles. And then I would come across something I forgot about on my second playthrough. And it was just like, and even stuff I knew what the solution was, I was still stressed out because there's all these moments where things are chasing you. And like, anyway, it's a very horrifying game too. The first time I played it, I wasn't super scared. It was pre-transition. I wasn't on hormones yet, but I guess estrogen has really amped up all my feelings of emotions. So then when I was playing this game, I was just horrified the whole time.
And I'd say my experience playing the game is quite similar. Now, I'm not on estrogen, but I will say I am a fraidy cat. I am definitely easily scared. And this game had me in a state of almost near constant anxiety. So playing this game is not soothing. It is not relaxing. This is very much a game for myself that is one that I sit and savor with. And I savor the commentary. It's a very dense game in terms of what it's saying. It creates a very bleak and interesting world that has confounded gamers for years. So I honestly don't mind spoiling this for all you dear listeners out there, because if you haven't played it, it's been, however many years since it came out. So that sounds like a you problem. But
and for a game that's 10 years old too, I just want to note it's aged very well.
Oh, it's one of those games that is like good literature. You can come back to it, and I think it's also quite timely for, the times we're in right now as well. And isn't that just a little bit bleak and depressing as well? Because a game that is so grim and dark and dystopian, somehow we came back around.
I mean, it's I'm not happy that we're in a world now that kind of reflects Inside, or Inside reflects the world, but it is a statement of good art and good literature, like you said, where this game is so reflective of things in the real world. Like, it's just a very, very tight, well-told story, if you can even call it a story. I mean, we called it literature, but like the narrative is very simple. You are a kid moving from one point of the world to another. You're just moving across the world. And sometimes, yeah, there's obstacles, but ultimately you're moving from left to right. Like, it's no more complicated in its storytelling than Super Mario Bros. From 1985.
And I think that it uses the medium of the side scrolling really well, because it puts you on this path that you can't seem to deviate from. Yes, there's some variation of like levels going underground or climbing up above somewhere. There's some variation and some three-dimensional aspects that are added with some of the puzzles, where you have different planes that are moving, like background or foreground. But for the most part, you are on this strict set path. And I will have so much more to talk about with that path later on.
Well, we're going to talk about the game a bit broadly more, but I do want to set up, I haven't actually stated why we're talking about Inside. So, as I'm sure listeners will have heard at the beginning of the podcast, but just to reintroduce it, we are going to ask the question, is Inside by Playdead a queer game? And on its surface, and when you told me you thought it was a queer game, on its surface, I thought about it for a second and I was like, no, it's not a queer game. Like, it's just this kid running from left to right. Like, there's nothing queer about that. And then I started thinking about it more and more. And then I played it again this week and I thought about it more and more. And I'm still not sure the answer is yes. We might not even reach a definitive answer. And that's not the point. We're just here to talk about it. But the more I thought about it and the more things I saw in the game, I was like, there's definitely queer elements to this for sure.
And that's the great thing about art, especially ambiguous art, is we can disagree. You can have your own theories about Inside. We each have our theories about Inside. We're going to talk. I have no idea what you're going to say. So I'm probably going to learn a thing or two about this game talking with you. And isn't that the whole point of playing games? To play something, have an experience, and talk about it with your friends so that maybe you learn something, or maybe you just get to say that you were right after all and have bragging rights, because sometimes that's nice too.
Well, I've actually been hoping, I'm not saying this is going to happen on this show where we agree on most things, but because I've had all my friends on the podcast and people I like and trust, there hasn't been a lot of debate and disagreement. I've been thinking about this lately. So if we did get into a good debate where we fully disagreed, that would be super exciting because like, I obviously don't want to disagree about things like basic human rights, but there's things where we have opinions about art like this. That's where a good debate comes from. And I wouldn't say no to a good argument, Monty Python style, where you show up and I'd like an argument, please.
Or that skit about returning cheese. I would like a little bit of a fight, please.
So,
anyways, So let's talk. I want to hear some of your thoughts about this game because there is a lot. I definitely had multiple colors of pens going while I didn't do a second playthrough because I honestly got like halfway through the game playing and my anxiety just could not. So I watched a playthrough because I wanted to actually take detailed notes. So there are some aspects that I'm looking at it from a more academic critical lens. But I do have my memories of playing it, and some of the moments of this game are the most memorable video game moments I've had, because it was so visceral, and I will never forget that, for better or worse.
Well, my thoughts. First off, I think this is a 10 out of 10 game, no matter how you feel about what the story is about or what you've read from it. Just from a pure gameplay perspective, it takes things, like I said, like Mario from the 80s. Like it takes things like that game did, and really just like, not that it does it better, because I think it's not doing what Mario did, but like from a gameplay side of things, like it's just like really honing in on that, like jumping, running, trying to get around the world. Like it just, and like everything in the game, there's no fat in the game. It's like very cut and dry. There's nothing extra. Like, yeah, there's a bit of like branching paths where you have to solve a puzzle, but for the most part, like, and sometimes, yeah, the direction you're physically moving is not left to right, but this game is like, there's really not a lot to explore in the game. Like if you find a corridor, that corridor has a purpose, even if you don't know it yet. But in the game, that's what the whole game is about too, is like you open up the game, like you boot up the game, and like when I booted it up, I still had my old save file, but when I booted it up, it didn't recognize that save file. It just dropped me into a new game. Because when you finish the game, it just like erases your save and it starts you over again. So it like the game just like you're on the side of a cliff, you drop down and you're in this dark forest and you have no idea what to do. Obviously, gameplay design tells you move left to right, so you do. And as you're moving along, you figure out that, okay, you can jump, you can grab things, and that's pretty much it. Like you have 3 things to do. You can run, jump, and grab things to like carry things.
And the grab is kind of your action command, which it's the same button no matter whether you are jumping to grab onto something or press a button or pick something up or push or pull. It's the same button. So it's in terms of gameplay design, it couldn't be simpler.
And when I say it doesn't give you any instructions, like you can go into the menu and see a control map. It shows you what each button does, right? But there's nowhere in the game where like the first time you have to jump over something, it doesn't like a little button that says A to jump. Like it doesn't appear over anything. There's no text in the game. There's no explanations. And so, but what I love even more about the instructions for that than that is the first time you run into adults in the game, very early on, the character is animated to crouch when he comes near them. And you start instinctively going like, why is he hiding from adults? And then you realize like, oh, okay, if he's hiding, like I obviously don't want to do anything to attract the attention of these adults. And if you do, they make a beeline for you. And as far as I could tell, the adults don't kill the child. Other elements of the game will kill the child. In fact, this kid ragdolls a lot when you get blown up, especially like when you get killed, especially that thing that the sound waves that hit you and they just yeet you at the camera and blood splatters everywhere. That's later in the game.
Oh yeah, the shockwave moment. That was something that we'll talk about the shockwaves, but I think that was set up perfectly and executed wonderfully.
And stressful as fuck.
Because I might as well bring it up now, like the entire, like the section prior to the shockwaves, you can hear them through the walls. You can hear a slight, like the sound, but you don't know what the cause is. And then you get there and you're like, oh, that's the cause. So in terms of setting it up, it's kind of sets it up the entire like chapter or like little section before that moment. Sets it up perfectly. So when it actually came, it was a very satisfying payoff to finally discover what the sound is that you've been hearing for the last section of platforming and puzzling.
And what that section does and what other sections do where you learn by failing. So like the first time you actually see the sound waves come at you, you're like, oh, what are those? And the first time you're behind a barrier. And then when you move outside of that barrier, you realize, oh, I can't be exposed when the shock waves happen. And that's the same thing with adults. Whenever you discover anything new in this game, it's going to kill you. If you don't know if you don't know how to play the game, or you've played it before, you don't have any context, you're like, oh, look, a dog. And then the dog is ripping your throat out. Oh, look, a mermaid. Not technically a mermaid. It's like a human with really long hair that acts kind of like a siren. But you're like, oh crap, it's coming after me. And if it catches up to you, it will kill you. It's like that very primal fear of like when you're a little kid and you're hiding your feet under the covers and you're like, oh, a monster's going to get me. It like preys on that. Like the second you dip a toe in the water, the siren comes out of nowhere to get you. The second you step into the light, an adult comes running at you. And yeah, there's like lots of questions, and we're going to get into this later, but like there's lots of questions about like, why are people trying to stop this kid from getting to where he's going? You know, like who is the bad guy in this game? But I just think from a gameplay perspective, it's just so well designed in its simplicity. And it makes me really sad that Playdead kind of fell apart as a company. And a lot of people at the top of that company went their separate ways, and we're never getting another game from that cohesive team again. There's been follow-up games like Somerville, Cocoon. I think those all came from people who worked at Playdead. And I think Playdead is still working on a game, although I haven't heard anything from them in years. But so they just have 2 games. They have Limbo, which is like very similar to Inside, but it came out before Inside, and it's not as good. It's still very, very good. But whereas Inside's a 10 out of 10, Limbo's like an 8.5 or a 9 out of 10. So anyway, yeah. What are your like initial impressions?
Well, you've mentioned the start, it just kind of throws you in, which I am usually quite torn about that. I think this game's narrative pacing is perfect, though. I think that without any dialogue, it's able to catch you up to speed on what the world is. Again, through learning through contrast, learning through failure, you will get killed a lot. Like you will die. So when I said if everything goes well, the game takes about 2 hours to finish. But nothing will go well. And that's kind of, to me, one of the points of the game, is you're in this society that very much reminds me of George Orwell's 1984. You have a lot of moments where you can tell that society has crumbled. People are being mind controlled. You have lines of people when you get to a city, you have lines of people walking, and they all seem kind of mindless, as if they are being controlled or puppeteered, but they're very crudely puppeteered. They're all moving like zombies. They're not. They pay you absolutely no mind.
Yeah, there's a difference between, sorry to cut you off. I just want to say there's like a huge difference too between, and maybe we're going to talk about this later, but there's a difference between the puppeted humans and then the sentient humans almost. Anyway, sorry, please continue.
Oh, and there's so much to talk about with this game. I'm going to just make a note of that. Because as you said, when you encounter adults, they will make a beeline for you. So you have to do a lot of things out of sight. However, when you see these mindless people, they can be walking right past you and you can be doing whatever. They will pay you no mind. So it's a kind of false sense of security that doesn't make you feel very secure, because you're like, oh, that's bleak, which is often the response of this game. You're like, well, now some interesting things I noticed about this game is the only real bit of color is your character. They wear this red sweater that is still a very muted red sweater, but it's pretty much the only bright color within the game. The palette is very monotone, or monochrome. It's very much like you are the child in Schindler's List.
Yeah, that's a good comparison.
You are the one splash of color in this world. There are, of course, other colors, but it's all like dark greens, dark browns, dark blues, and the lighting is perfect. Speaking of light is not your friend in this game. Light very much is...
It exposes you.
The enemy. It exposes you. So darkness is your friend. Every time if you get into a spotlight, a taser comes out of nowhere and you ragdoll and get pulled up. if you get into the beam of a flashlight of one of the guards, who are all masked, I will add. Now, all the characters are pretty featureless as well. Every character is faceless. There are no hard and fast features. You just know that that's a person because it's human shaped. But no one is defined. So this adds to the ambiguity of the piece.
Yeah, there's no close-ups of anyone either. Like, it doesn't, the camera, they do play with depth, but they don't ever like bring the player character or any characters really close to the camera. We don't get to know who anyone is. We don't even really know who the child is that you're playing as. So.
And there is this aspect that you cannot deviate from the path you're on, which is utilizing the style of game perfectly. And whenever you're creating anything, you want to pay attention to what medium you're using, because that should be intentional as well. And in this game, in this world of Inside, it is very much a society that is not working. And you are on some path, but you're not entirely sure what that path is until much later in the game's climax. It also follows some pretty classic storytelling as well, because it starts you off in a pastoral setting. Which is as classic as, in many fantasy stories. You always begin in the country, you start in the Shire, and then you end up going towards whatever city or civilization. So this game follows the same path. You start in a forest, you go to a farm, and then you end up on a city. After the farm moment is where you see your first little bit of sunlight, and it is very short-lived. It's a moment of serene peace. That's a moment where I'm like, oh, this is nice. What's that big ass wall that blocks out the sun? And suddenly you're right back into the gray. The natural world is trying to poke through, but the world of Inside is very utilitarian, and it's been paved over. And the further you get into the game, the more polished, sterile, clinical, and manufactured the world is. You go from more natural settings into like literal science labs, which are completely man-made.
Yeah, I mean, even when you go underwater, there's like large swaths of underwater sections. I don't know why I use the word swaths there. That doesn't even apply. But when you go underwater, like, it's still like sunken cities. It's things that have been trashed. Like, you see animals, like you see fish. And there's also the discussion of like what animals and these animals that follow you every time you run into them, whether they're chasing you or they just think you're interesting. But like even underwater, like, yeah, there's nothing really natural down there except for the fish and except for you. It's like buried machinery. It's sunken cities. Anyway. So.
And Inside very much, it teaches the player to play in hostile terrain and also to relish being alone, because the only times you feel safe in this game are when you are alone. If there are any other characters on screen, there are moments where you are controlling some of these shells of people. You put on this cap that allows you to control people within the area, and that's where you get the dimension, because these figures are usually in the background, and so you're moving them in the background to do your puzzle solving, or sometimes you're creating a little mob to follow you around and who can lift you up and throw you to higher places and whatnot, of people following you around just because you have this helmet on. Those are the only people you feel safe with, but they are also tools. Your character, as soon as you are past that platforming section or that puzzle, you discard them. And sometimes they fall very far. You are not nice to your little puppets.
You're not nice to anyone in this world, even the things that are not nice to you.
Yeah, the game really does not encourage kindness.
No.
Because it encourages everyone for themselves. And also because it's impressive with the scale of these oppressive constructs. There are many moments where you're approaching the next section and it's just looming in front of you, and it makes you feel very small. Because again, your character is a child, roughly 10 years old. And you just feel small compared to the world that you exist in. And it really does, again, make you feel a little sad when you think about just how large society is, but also how one person can make a difference.
Whether that difference is positive or negative at the end, I'm not sure. But you were mentioning kindness too, and there's not a lot of kindness in this game. And there's a moment that always catches me off guard, and I forgot it was in the game. But like I said, there's things that chase you in this game. Everything chases you. Humans, rabbit, like, I don't know if they're rabid, they seem trained to be trained dogs. And then there's these sirens in the ocean. These, like, I don't know if they're male or female, but they're like these human bodies. They're pale, and they live underwater, and they have really long black hair. Think Sadako from Ringu, for example. Like, really long, very distinctive, kind of scary looking hair. And the second you dip a toe in the water, they come right for you. They make a beeline for you, and they kill you. And every time you die because of a siren, it's scripted. But at a certain point, you're trying to escape the siren who's been following you for multiple sections. Like, you lose her, and then she comes back, and then you lose her, and then she comes back. And then at one point, you're actually trying to climb up to a higher surface, and it breaks, and you fall, and the siren gets you, and you're like, oh shit. So you're waiting for the game to reboot so you can respawn, so you can figure out why that thing broke and how you can not fuck up next time. But the game just keeps she just keeps dragging you down. The game doesn't reset. And the kid is fighting this whole time. And then he finally gives up, and the siren starts biting him, like in the neck, like a vampire. And just everything in the game calms down. Like, you don't feel stress as you kind of accept your fate. And I honestly got the sense, and this is my interpretation, is that she was trying to help him. She is trying to help you accomplish your goal. And you have been resisting her this entire time. Yeah, the dogs were trying to tear you apart. Obviously, there's nothing the dogs can do for you. But the siren might have the same goal you have, but failed before. So she's like, hey, let me help you. I'm going to give you the ability to swim underwater without threats and without having to worry about breathing and resurfacing for air.
Which, that's also very interesting because it takes the water from an environment that feels very anxiety-inducing and hostile, and it suddenly makes it into a safer space, which is really brilliant storytelling on the game developer's side. The thing I noticed about that section is, yes, she's holding you down, but it's a very gentle caress. Once you finish struggling and you have your last gasp of air, it's a moment of like, oh my goodness, what's happening? What's happening? And then she does plug something into your chest as you are falling and implants something in you. And then when you reach a certain depth, the cord like pulls out by itself. And then when you come to, you can breathe underwater. What happened? The game doesn't tell you. So if you want an answer, I'm sorry, I don't know what else to tell you. You're not going to get it.
Yeah, I like to think she's a friend, though. Maybe other people would interpret it differently, but I think she's a friend.
Well, it's also the last time you see a siren in the game. Like, you don't, after that moment, you no longer have to deal with sirens as a threat. Because the sirens show up in, I think, 2 or 3 sections of the game before this moment. I think it's 2 moments where you really have to deal with them. But this is the last time you see them in the game. It's like that finishes their arc in this story.
I almost wonder if it's just one siren that follows you because
it could well be.
But anyway, so let's kind of segue here. Not a great transition point here, but I'm curious about your thoughts and maybe to start making your case for what you think is queer about the game. Because I have thoughts too. I have reasons why I think it could be queer, why I think it could be not. As far as I could tell, it's not queer in the sense that it was made by queer developers that we know of anyway. That doesn't mean it can't be a queer game. Scarlet Hollow is a really amazing game made by not queer people, but allies, and it's full of queer content. So that's not to say it can't be a queer game for that reason, but I'm just curious what you think, just like your...
Well, I think that I definitely was surprised in that it definitely makes a lot of social and political commentary. And I think that that's where I also get my lens into the fact that this is a queer game, because first of all, we can make the obvious comparison that your character is the only splash of color. And given that the association with queerness is the rainbow, the progress flag, which is all these different colors, anything colorful is generally associated with queerness, especially, and this is a common association with many queer storytelling, with much of queer storytelling, you find instances where the world is very bleak, and then the queerness adds the color, it adds the liveliness, it adds something to it. And I think this is in one way queer people describing what it was like in the closet versus when they came out, where the world just seemed to literally change, like colors became brighter and you suddenly had hope that you didn't have to struggle in the closet for the rest of your existence. You can choose something else. So I think the adding of color to your character being the only splash of color, to me, reads a little bit queer. I also think that that's a kind of nice thing. Don't worry, we're going to get back to the depressing stuff. This is inside after all. So I think that for me, the experience of being queer in a heteronormative society, and especially a very oppressive one like this, is anxiety inducing. It is depressing. It is bleak. And the fact that you are the one splash of color in this bleak existence, I think I can draw some queer comparisons right there. Even without playing much of the game, you can see that because you see threats everywhere. Dogs are threats. People wear masks, and people are threats. People will shoot at you if given the chance. People will hunt you down. They will try to do everything they can to stop you. And the only moments where you can really sneak past adults is when there's a moment where you're in line and you have to do everything that the line is doing. You have to move in an exact specific path. Keeping the same distance between you and the person in front of and behind you. If they all jump, you have to jump. If they turn around, you have to turn around. And if you don't, you have a spotlight on you the entire time. And to me, this one moment is what made me really think about this as a queer game, because so many queer people are imitating heterosexuality for so much of their life, and they are under such scrutiny because when you are in the closet and trying to be straight, whatever that means, because there is so many difficult definitions when you talk about being something on both sides, because it demands a certain necessity, it demands a certain definitive definition of personage, which is something philosophers have struggled with for centuries. What does it mean to be self? But we can definitely get queer people playing this game. I felt that spotlight that's on you is very anxiety inducing, and I'm fumbling with the controls, and I'm trying so hard to be like everyone else in the line, even though everyone else is mindless and not even thinking about what they're doing, because that's just their existence. That's their reality. You have a bit of free will, and you're trying to not get found out, because if you get found out, you die.
Yeah.
And I died a lot in that section because I was so bad at being like everyone else. Oh my God, commentary? Shocking. So that's a moment that to me makes me think of this as a queer game, like first and foremost.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because that's what makes it a queer game for me, is that like these times where you're hiding and you're trying to stay in the darkness, you're trying to stay behind objects, trying not to get found by someone, especially when the adults are coming after you, when a dog makes a beeline for you. It's like, as soon as you step out of the light, say I step out of the closet, like when I was trying to hide, like before I came out, like I would wear women's underwear. And I was so scared that someone would find my drawer with women's underwear. I was so scared that if I did anything slightly feminine, people would point at me and laugh, or point at me and shun me. And that's how and then the being found out, like people chasing after you, that's the experience of trying to hide in the closet and not be found out is exactly how it feels in this game for me. That anxiety, the like sheer dread that I felt the second that a person was coming after me is the exact same kind of dread that I felt when I would like go outside as a kid, and I had my toenails painted for the first time ever. And I went outside wearing sandals, and as soon as the kids on the street saw that I was playing with, they were like, oh my, like immediately made fun of me. And I was like, well, I can never paint my toenails again, because that's like a dead giveaway. They're going to know I'm a girl, and, or that I want to be a girl. At least at the time, that's how it felt, right? Like, oh, and this can't want that because that goes against whatever, like you're not trans, like you're not trans. It's bad to be trans. You don't even have the words to communicate that you are trans. And so anyway, yeah, just like, yeah, that fear of being in the spotlight, that fear of like the second you make one mistake and then suddenly people are coming after you is exactly how it felt before I came out of the closet. So,
and And you also, like, mentioning this moment with the siren where you have a connection, that is also when you are newly out, you often learn from unlikely sources how to be and how to survive. Because queerness in this world is survival. And in a lot of cases, it is relegated to that kind of brutality of existence. Oh my god, Inside, it's such a brutal game. Wow, another comparison. Oh, I'm so full of them today. And it forces you to get comfortable in hostile situations. One of the most memorable moments of video games that I've ever played is a moment where you have to tear some boards off of a door, but there are dogs chasing you, and there's a chain link fence that you can climb over, and the dogs have to run around this entire, like, into the background and then come back to the foreground to get you. So you have to climb over the fence, lure them to run after you, then climb back over the fence, maybe pull one board away, then climb over the fence and repeat until the way is open. I have bad enough anxiety as it is. I don't need help Inside. This moment, I wanted to throw the controller across the room. And there were so many close calls, and it was so, like, you have to pull the boards off in a hostile place where if you stay too long, you will die. And going out there and doing your business, even though it's a hostile environment, that is the reality for a lot of queer people in this world. So again, commentary, look at that. Beep, bop, boop. And I think we are getting closer to the point where we're going to have to talk about the ending.
Yes, I wanted to ask about the ending next because, well, first off, can you explain what the ending is? And I know before we were talking, you blew my mind because apparently there's a secret ending. And now I'm not sure if last night I played the secret ending, because the original ending I remember is you roll back to the start of the game as the Ball of Humans. Anyway, maybe I'll have you explain the Ball of Humans first, the ending of the game, and then we'll talk about it.
So the Ball of Humans is one of the more famous visuals of the climax of the game, where you enter this science facility where they have many creatures in cages, much like how, specifically in earlier days of queer theater, especially in the 1940s on Broadway, it was very popular to have plays where, in the 30s and 40s, plays where queer tragedy was on display for the straight people to watch. These poor homosexuals struggle and ultimately die in a lot of cases, or be diseased, result in the end of the world, etc., etc. Queer equals bad, but it sure makes great entertainment to crucify them, eh? And so that's what I get when these people are being held in cages and being observed by scientists. It's the first time where you can walk right up to adults and they won't do anything. They are more focused on whatever is in one kind of aquarium that you can't see. But then as you go underneath it and get into it, you see it as this giant mass of limbs and flesh. And it has all these little mind control helmets on it. And as you pull them off, it sucks you into the mass, into the hole. And from that moment, you break out and you kind of have this moment where you go from this very powerless 10-year-old boy into this seemingly all-powerful mass of humans that is just rampaging through this facility, crushing people, breaking through walls. It's a massive change of pace for the game where it's suddenly very fast, and suddenly you go from having no power to all of the power. Now, to me, the huddle, as it's affectionately called, is representative of queer community as a whole. You find power when you find community and when you find people that can support you. And that's when you find the strength that was in you all along, because by yourself, you can't do much. But as a mass, as a huddle, as a conglomerate, there is power and hegemony, both good and evil. And the world as a whole is kind of in this hegemonic construct of oppression, but you yourself find a moment where you're able to kind of band together with all these other people who you don't know. You don't know who is in this massive body parts. You don't know who is in this tangle of limbs. And it's not really the point. I think a lot of contemporary queer individuals and activists really do a lot of work on the shoulders of people who they don't know, who have done the work prior to us even being born. You know, I'm talking about people who were at the Stonewall riots, as well as well before then, when drag was first beginning, when queerness was something hidden, and you know, was a lot of activism that was done that laid the foundation for where we are today. And is there more work to do? Absolutely. But you don't need to know every detail about what happened before to appreciate where we've come and appreciate what we can do now, especially now that we have community. We can find each other. We have spaces, and we need to fight to defend these spaces. And that's what the Huddle does, is you really fight to break free of this construct of oppression. And it's very satisfying to walk into someone's office who's clearly behind a desk and seems like a head honcho, bowl right into him, crash through the window, and splat him against the ground. Like, it's very satisfying after you've been hunted the entire game.
See, I have a slightly different interpretation of the Huddle, because I think that that's very, very, a very interesting take, and something I hadn't considered, because for me, like, I think everything about the game, like, first off, I think the player actually has more power than he realizes. Yes, he has to be secretive about it, but this player, as he moves through the game, like, you do have some control and you do have some autonomy and free will. But when you enter this mass of people that are like just as mindless as the people you've been controlling the whole game, it feels like you are giving into this mind control, almost like you don't actually have all this agency. And even though, yes, you are rampaging through, you are killing CEOs, like that kind of stuff, like you're Luigi Mangioning the place the fuck up, right? But you are still, I think you are still on a path that's being guided by the people that are experimenting on you, because there are many times where it looks like they're helping you escape. And maybe that can be interpreted when they throw you a box that you have to throw to press a button so you can get through a wall, or they dangle something for you to grab. Maybe they're allies, but also the sense I got was like, they were like, this is part of the experiment. They knew you would get out eventually. And now they're like, okay, well, now that this thing has escaped containment, now what can we learn from it? So, and maybe it's both things. Maybe it's neither.
I think what I was very interested by was the people who were helping you. Suddenly everyone seems to really want to assist you now that you are a monster. Now that you are this very powerful thing. It's really funny how people will support you. People will add funding as soon as they view you as something of a threat that needs to be placated. And I think that that's something that often happens, and you can see in the world, as soon as, like, queerness was something that was deemed as, it's perfectly fine to oppress queer people, to make fun of queer people, to ridicule them, to ostracize them and push them to the outskirts of society. But then as soon as it was discovered, oh no, they actually have power and agency, suddenly we get more funding, suddenly we get more attention, and now we also have the pendulum swinging back where that's being taken away in a lot of places. And I think that it's really the people helping the Huddle. Some of them, I think, could be allies, like, who maybe thought that what was being done was wrong, like human experimentation. Oh my God, just like animal testing. It's wrong. So some of them could be acting on conscience, but some of them I definitely thought were observing and there is a moment where there is a betrayal where they dangle a box for you, which you've been taught is a tool you need to progress, and then they dump you into water, and ultimately you get out regardless. But that is a moment where everyone is watching as they seal you away, and they're trying to be like, well, that threat is contained, that's placated for now. And I think you get out despite that, and that ultimately leads to your freedom and rolling down that hill where it's unclear whether you die or just kind of rest on the shore, and the sun rises, and it's the first warm light in the game. Even the sunlight you saw when you got out of the farm before was kind of a cold sunlight, but this is the first warm light you have in the entire game. And it's just a moment of serene peace, and I was kept waiting for something else to happen, and then the credits just rolled, and I'm like, oh, okay, I guess we're done. Well, all right then.
It also gives you edge of the map vibes, because like I said, we haven't seen the ocean yet in this game, and we don't know where this landmass is, but it feels like you've reached the edge of the map, and this is as close as you can come to escaping this oppressive society.
And given that it is a side-scrolling game, when you find the edge, it means that the game, the format with which you are playing in, has reached its limit.
So maybe I've been gaslighting myself, or maybe I'm confused with Limbo. But is there a version of the ending where instead of rolling onto down this hill onto this beach and watching the sunrise, is there another version where instead you are rolling back through the previous levels you've already gone through and just absolutely rampaging? Or am I now confused? Okay, so maybe I'm thinking of Limbo then, because I thought for sure that there was another, and I got a different ending this time. But anyway, then you told me before this podcast started recording that there's a secret ending, and now I'm curious because I haven't even processed what that is.
So throughout the game, there are secrets that you can find, and there are these little satellite-looking things. They're little disco balls that you can unplug, and they're making this whine. And when there's a moment where one of them, you are holding a torch, and you have to wave it to scare dogs away. And as you get closer to the secret, once you unplug it, all the dogs run away, like yiping in fear. So the threat is passed. And it's kind of unclear as to what these little beacons do. But the last one is a massive one that you can walk into. It looks like a spaceship. And when you unplug all of them, it kind of gives a set of directives that are on this kind of sign that's in the room that all, shows a bunch of directions. And once you beat the game, you can actually go back to the cornfield at the, near the farm, and you will find a hatch in the ground in the cornfield that you can go into where there is a door. It's like a bunker. And there's a door with a little handle that you can move in various directions. And if you put in the correct direction inputs, you can open this door, go through a very long and cramped tunnel, and it eventually brings you to an open laboratory looking room where there is one of these mind control helmets that's plugged into all of these different sensors and a bunch of TV screens. And it's all plugged into a wall. And every time, to preface, every time you've mind controlled someone for the use of a puzzle prior to this, as soon as you remove the helmet, they kind of go limp, they crouch down, and they just kind of huddle on the ground waiting to be activated again. It's like they turn off. So you, the boy, can unplug this computer, and as soon as it's unplugged, the light goes dark and the boy deactivates, like all of the other people that you've controlled through the game. So people are unclear of what this means, but I think it's clear that you had no free will and you were being controlled the entire time.
So that's interesting that that's the secret ending. Whether that's the true ending, quote unquote, or not, I don't know, but what's interesting to me about that is the first time I ever played this game, my interpretation when I became the huddle was that the huddle something was calling me to that huddle, controlling me to get there. And then once I was there, I was breaking free. And the reason everything was trying to stop me was because there's something wrong with kids in this world where if they become mind controlled, they will do something devastating and awful. I don't know what that's supposed to mean, and I didn't think beyond that, but the sense I got was maybe the adults were the good guys and they were trying to stop you from doing something bad. Maybe they were trying to protect you, because I noticed the adults, not the dogs, but the adults use tranquilizers to subdue you. And sometimes they strangle you. But maybe when they're strangling you, they're just trying to suffocate you long enough that you pass out and not kill you. I did notice, though, that there wasn't... and maybe the Switch version was low resolution enough. Maybe it was blood splatters I was misinterpreting. But it looked like tranquilizer darts that put you out. And maybe they're just trying to subdue you to stop you from making a bad decision. And even that could be read as queer. Maybe they're just trying to stop you from coming out of the closet. They're like, hey, Mom, Dad, I'm gay. No, you're not. There were no signs. Even my parents said, we never saw any signs that you were trans. And I was I listed everything that I knew they knew about. And they were like, we never saw it that way. And I was like, what the fuck? So anyway, I do think that's interesting because I've had multiple interpretations of this game. And even now you're changing my opinion. There will not be an argument today because I agree with everything that you are saying.
And what I've heard various theories, about what this game means. And, again, it's confounded gamers for years, as I said already. And that's the great thing about an ambiguous piece. You can talk about it. Some people believe that you were being controlled by the scientists to gather a bunch of skills, gain some problem solving, some critical thinking skills, and then become part of the huddle to impart those skills to the huddle so that it could break free. Others think that the huddle is controlling you to come and break it free. Because they have mind control devices plugged into it all over. And some think that all human, like the huddle is connected to all of the human experiments. And so therefore it's also connected to the siren. Therefore it's also connected to all of the people who are being controlled to walk into the facility. There really is no correct answer, unfortunately. But I think that personally, I think from what I've seen, I think that the secret ending kind of undermines a little bit of the argument of this as a queer game. And I'm not talking queer as in strange, because oh my goodness, is it a strange game. In the classic definition of queer, this game is very queer. But I also think that there is enough ambiguity, as well as enough, if you read between the lines and interpret things a certain way, that you can feel very much like a queer person going through this world of Inside, seeking out something, whether you view the huddle as community or whether you view it as power or as whatever, merely just the desire to be free, to be left alone so you can sit on a beach in the sun. Maybe that's all the huddle wants, because I know I love napping on a beach. It's not summer if I haven't fallen asleep on a beach and gotten terribly burnt.
Oh, beach naps. We should do that this summer. But yes, no, I think you've made a good case that, like, even if it's not intentionally queer, it can definitely be read as queer. And I hesitate to use the term queer coded, because I've never liked that, because queer coding implies that the creator intentionally left queer something ambiguous in a story to imply queerness. And I don't think usually, like, when you're like, oh, these 90s villains were queer coded, like, I'm not sure that they were queer coded in the sense that any designer intended that. It might be subconscious in the sense that, like, hey, I see queer people as bad, therefore I'm going to make the flamboyant man the villain. But I don't think queer coding, like, implies intentionality, and I'm not sure that this game is intentionally LGBTQ+. I think it can definitely be read that way, though, and I like that reading of the game because it helps me make sense of it. Even though, to be honest, it's the kind of game where even when I'm confused or disappointed, like, there's something new and interesting after the thing that just happened that confused you, and you've forgotten about it, and you're moving on to this new interesting thing. And I've never, even when you got to the beach ending, and I was sitting on the beach and I couldn't do anything, and I was pressing buttons, and I was like, can I still move? Do I jump in the ocean? Like, I don't remember what happens next. And then the credits roll. I was confused, but then I just stopped and started processing everything. And, like, there's no moment in this game where I'm, like, truly disappointed. And that's why, among many reasons, I think it's a 10 out of 10 game. And it's the reason I like Prometheus. And Prometheus, a lot of people would argue, is a bad movie, but I disagree. Yeah, characters make bad choices that make no sense. I don't like it for that. I don't think it's a good movie for that reason, but I think it's a 10 out of 10 movie because, like Inside, I'm still talking about it years later and theorizing things about what everything means in that movie. And my favorite pieces of content are things that make me question things, ask questions, have discussions, disagree, agree with my friends.
And learn to run sideways instead of in a straight line. I think that... Oh my god, I lost my train of thought. Yes! Found it! I think that this is a game that, while I hesitate to say it is specifically a queer game, it has the reading to it, and more importantly, it's an experiential game, which is how I describe a lot of games that are in this kind of genre, where they're short. It's really about experiencing things, like games like Rhyme and Journey and Bound, and, you know, there's so many games that are more about Abzu as well. It's this, I put Inside in the same category as these games that are, again, short, bite-sized, rich with meaning, meant to be debated and discussed. And I think that if you are a queer individual who plays this game and feels a resonant experience with the hostility of the world, because even if you're in a very progressive place that's very welcoming and accepting of queerness, like, I live in Toronto, and I've gotten sideways glances. I've been outright harassed when I shared a kiss with a partner in public. I've been mocked and ridiculed, and everyone's like, oh, but the city's so progressive. It's like, interesting. it doesn't matter where you are, there's still going to be that hostility. And I think if you, a queer individual, play this game and feel resonance with that, you can give this game to your friends, specifically if they're straight friends, and be like, if you want to know what it's like to live queer in the world, play this game. Because you will feel what it's like to not trust anyone, to feel better off alone, and also to feel like you need to cling to the shadows for survival. Because even to this day, queer people cling to the shadows for survival. Like, queer villages are still very much about, you know, kind of being off the beaten track, or kind of being like its own little subsect, and not being super like well developed, but like a little seedy and run down, because that's culture. That's queer culture, is being in the seedy, run down part of town.
I mean, there's even different parts of the city and the Greater Toronto area, and just Southern Ontario in general, where like they're not unsafe for queer people. I wouldn't describe them as unsafe. I think that's the wrong word, but it is a different vibe. I can tell when people have clocked me in certain, like I feel a different vibe, and I feel a different reaction to my existence in different areas, even in Toronto. And that, to me, like you said, like clinging to the shadows, like, yeah, I know if I go to the queer village on Church Street, I know that for the most part, I won't be ridiculed, but you know, I can go somewhere that's a little bit more straight washed, somewhere a little bit more mainstream. And I know that like the farther I get away from the downtown core, the weirder looks I will get from people who do clock me. Now, as I progress in my transition, and if I keep my mouth shut too, because my voice doesn't pass, at least in the traditional sense, and I don't really care about passing for the most part, but if you're on estrogen long enough, you will pass more and more. It's just how it works. Your body changes. I've seen it happen to literally every single trans woman. I've seen it happen to every trans man, that over time they pass more. And so I find that over time I experience these things, these reactions to me less and less, but because I experienced them early on, I have attributed those things to like these places where I had these stronger reactions. And that's where I feel like inside really comes into play, is that like I'm really scared that if I walk out from behind this bush, someone's going to hit me with a tranquilizer or try to strangle me or sick their dogs on me, in the inside sense. That hasn't happened, although today
I was going to be like, the fuck are you doing in bushes?
Yeah, and to be honest, I think a cis woman could play this game and attribute these messages to misogyny. You know, like apply misogyny to a misogynistic reading to this game. So, and maybe that's what's so great about Inside, is that any kind of trauma, any kind of societal experience that's negative, you could probably apply with Inside. And maybe that's what makes it such a great fucking game.
The fact that also, I think what also is really important about this is that, yes, you can read it a number of ways. And I think that that is simultaneously depressing as well as heartening, because they say that there is more that binds us together than tears us apart. We are more similar as people, as humans, as stewards of this land. We have more in common than we have differences. We want to celebrate these differences, but we also have to remember we are all people. We are all doing our best, and some compassion for people would be helpful. Because this game really, whether you talk with your friends and, you know, someone's like, no, this is a game about misogyny, or this is a game about homophobia and transphobia, and or this is a game that really depicts what it feels like to be to be the subject of racial prejudice, or whatever. The game is the same, and the player brings their experience to playing that game, and ultimately every player brings their experience to every game they play. So the fact that we're talking about Inside being a queer game is one thing. That's what this podcast episode has been about. Mm-hmm. But you can do this to any game at all, because if it's a good, well-constructed, well-thought-out game, it should be resonant with more than one type of person. It should be something that the majority of people, not everything has to be for everyone. It's really great to have games that is like, this is specific to people of a certain experiential background. This is specific for people who struggle with mental health. This is specific for people who are of a particular background. It's great to have content that makes those very detailed references to culture and experience. But what I find really great about those kinds of creations, whether it's a play, a book, a video game, a film, is I get to learn something about the world by seeing it through someone else's eyes. And even if I don't understand all of the references, I don't have to, because if it's well constructed, I don't need to know everything to appreciate, enjoy, and learn something from it.
Going back to the fact that it's not necessarily a queer game and you bring your queer experience to it, just because it's not a queer game doesn't mean it's not a queer game. And I'm trying very hard not to sound like that Wreck-It Ralph quote where he's like, just because you're a bad guy does not mean you're a bad guy. But, you know, it's true that like, and you're saying that like any game can be like this and you can bring your experience to it. But I consider Pokemon Crystal of all things a queer game, even though it's really not queer in most ways. At least maybe there's some like very, very superficial ways. Like there's a Pokemon that's kind of like, or there's one trainer that might be trans or like that kind of thing in these Pokemon games. But it was the first time you could ever play as a woman in these games. And so for me, that was a big eye-opening moment where I was like, oh, wow, this is one of the earliest video games I could ever play. I could understand, I could read, I could engage with Pokemon because I was 7 years old, right? I wasn't playing a lot of video games at 7 years old. And most of the ones I had access to were like, yeah, I had male video game characters and they were preset characters like Mario, for example, or Link. But Pokemon lets you bring yourself to it. It lets you bring your true avatar to the game. See what I did there? So
Clever.
For me, being able to play as a girl meant I could be myself in this game. And that bringing myself to it in that way makes Pokemon Crystal a queer game for me. And I know that it's a queer game for that reason because many, many other trans women experience it. There was a tweet that went viral a few years ago about how Pokemon Crystal is so expensive now on the secondhand market because every trans woman who ever played it has kept their copy and it has not entered back into the retail space. They've never resold it because it is so nostalgic to them as an egg moment. Anyway.
Well, I lost my copy of Crystal in a flood. That was my first Pokemon game as well. And I also played the girl character. Because I was like, I don't want to play the boy. I want to play the girl. Because I had the choice. But I think my final thought is, I personally think Inside is a great queer game. I think it has great queer implications, undertones, subtext to it. And what makes it a beautiful game is it has so many layers. And have we cracked the code for Inside? Absolutely not. We are just two more individuals who are hypothesizing and theorizing about this game. But maybe it has spiraled, stirred some thoughts, and maybe one day we'll know exactly what the game means. Or maybe not knowing is the point. Maybe it's ultimately the point of the game is what you carry inside yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the game, we don't have time to get into this, but the game does really live up to the title a lot of times and in a lot of ways. But yeah, no, I think that's a really great point to end on. I think it's a game that I hope I almost hope I never find out what the answers to it are because the questions are far more interesting to ask than the answers are to define. It's why I hope, like I said about Prometheus, like I hope I never find out exactly why the engineers wanted to end Earth, you know, because I think the theories are way more fun to ask those questions. And the same thing, like I don't want to know why the huddle is the way that it is and why it exists, you know? And if the devs ever did come out and say it, it might upset a lot of people because it would not match their experiential reading of it. So, Graeme, where can people find you?
Best place to find me is on Instagram at Insta Graeme 999. So Instagram, because I'm so clever like that. Mm-hmm. That's probably the best place to find me and keep up with what I'm doing.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining me this week. This was actually, I wasn't sure where this conversation was going to go, just that we were going to have a nice chat, but like I was like almost like hoping we would disagree, but we didn't. So thank you so much for joining me and for putting up with all the times I was like, oh, I had a thought. Let me just interrupt your entire train of thought.
That's what good discussion is, especially between friends.
And that just about wraps up this week's show. Thanks to your avatars for joining me for another episode of your Queer Video Game Podcast. If you've made it this far into the episode, I really appreciate you taking the time to support queer-made content, which is a big deal. If you want to support the show, it would be really great if you could leave a rating, review, or comment on your preferred podcast platform. I welcome you to check out the website, trueavatarspodcast.com, all one word. That's trueavatarspodcast.com. You can also find the show on Blue Sky, Threads, and YouTube under the handle @TrueAvatars, all one word, and on Instagram under TrueAvatars. Importantly, if you or anyone you know is queer and involved with video games in some way, please don't be shy. I would love to hear from more queer voices in video games. Your voice is unique, invalid, and worth sharing with the world. And if you don't want to be on the show or know anyone who's interested, but you know about a cool queer video game or games industry story that's queer related, please let me know. The show's official email is trueavatars.podcast@gmail.com. That's trueavatars.podcast@gmail.com. You can also feel free to reach out via the website or the aforementioned social media pages. Things are tough out there, and queer people need to stick together when we can. Bye, True Avatars. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to speaking with you all again next week. Take care and stay safe.